I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing at 6 in the morning, which was unusual because my oil delivery was not supposed to arrive until 9. The text message made my blood run cold. It was from my brother Marcus, and all it said was, "They won't let me in. Some woman is blocking the entrance with her car." I threw on my clothes faster than I had moved in years and rushed outside into the crisp October morning air. My house in Meadowbrook, Connecticut, was at the end of Willow Lane, a street that wound through one of those cookie-cutter developments where every third house looked identical. The HOA here was strict, but I had never imagined they would actually prevent essential services from reaching residents. When I got to the main entrance of our subdivision, I saw exactly what Marcus had described. A silver Lexus was parked diagonally across the access road, completely blocking the oil truck that bore the logo of Patterson Fuel Company. Standing next to the Lexus with her arms crossed was Patricia Whitmore, the HOA president, a woman in her late 40s with an angular face and hair so rigidly styled it looked like it could withstand a hurricane. "What is going on here?" I called out as I approached, my breath making small clouds in the cold air. Patricia turned to face me, and I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. "Oliver Kane, good morning. I am simply enforcing the new regulations that were passed at last month's HOA meeting." "What regulations?" "I was at that meeting, and there was nothing about blocking fuel deliveries." She pulled out a printed document from her designer handbag and held it up like it was a sacred text. Section 12, subsection 4. Commercial vehicles over 10,000 pounds are now prohibited from entering the subdivision between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. on weekdays. I looked at the oil truck, then back at Patricia. "That is insane. How are people supposed to heat their homes?" "You should have attended the meeting more carefully," she said with a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. "We voted on this. The heavy trucks were damaging the roads, and we cannot have that." Marcus climbed down from the truck cab, and I could see the frustration on his face. My brother was 3 years older than me, built like he still played college football, which he had until a knee injury ended that dream. He had been driving oil trucks for Patterson Fuel for almost 15 years now, and he knew every route in Fairfield County like the back of his hand. "Oliver, I have got 6 more deliveries after yours," Marcus said. "I cannot sit here all day arguing with this woman." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "This woman has a name, and she has the authority of the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association behind her. You will not be entering this subdivision today or any other day during prohibited hours." I felt my temper rising, but I tried to keep my voice level. "Patricia, my oil tank is at 20%. The weather forecast says we are getting below freezing temperatures starting tomorrow night. I have 2 young kids in that house." "Then you should have scheduled your delivery for after 7 p.m., she replied coolly. Marcus stepped closer, and I saw something change in his expression. He was studying Patricia's face with an intensity that I recognized from our childhood. My brother had this unusual ability to remember faces. Not just remember them, but recall exactly where and when he had seen someone before. It was almost uncanny, and it had gotten us out of trouble more than once when we were kids. "I know you," Marcus said slowly, his eyes locked on Patricia's face. "You were at the Riverside Casino in Rhode Island about 3 months ago, Thursday night." The color drained from Patricia's face so quickly I thought she might faint. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Yeah, you do," Marcus continued, his voice gaining confidence. "You were at the high-stakes poker tables. I remember because I was there for my buddy's bachelor party, and you were making a scene because you had lost a lot of money. You were screaming at the dealer, saying the game was rigged. Security had to escort you out." Patricia's carefully composed expression cracked. That is preposterous. I have never been to a casino in my life. But her voice wavered, and I knew Marcus had hit something real. I had seen him do this before. Whatever he remembered, it was accurate. Really. Marcus pulled out his phone. Because I am pretty sure my friend Derek took some videos that night. We thought the whole thing was hilarious. Want me to check? You are bluffing, Patricia said, but she took a step backward. Am I? Marcus started scrolling through his phone. Let me see. Derek sent me a bunch of stuff from that night. There was that video of the drunk guy doing karaoke, the one where Steve fell off his chair, and oh yeah, here it is. The crazy lady at the poker table. I moved closer to Marcus and glanced at his phone screen. He was actually looking at a video, and while I could not make out the details from my angle, I could see it was definitely from inside a casino. Patricia's hands were trembling now. This is blackmail. No, I said, finally understanding what was happening. This is you realizing that you do not want certain information getting out. Like maybe the fact that you spend your time at casinos when you have told everyone in the neighborhood that you are completely opposed to gambling. Was not that part of your campaign when you ran for HOA president? Family values and all that. She stared at us, her jaw working but no words coming out. Marcus leaned against his truck. You know, I remember faces, all kinds of faces, all kinds of places. And I drive this route 5 days a week. I see a lot of interesting things. A lot of interesting people going places they might not want others to know about. What do you want? Patricia finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Move your car, I said simply. Let my brother make his delivery. And while you are at it, maybe reconsider this ridiculous regulation that is going to leave half the neighborhood freezing when winter really hits. Patricia stood there for a long moment, and I could see her mind racing, weighing her options. Finally, she walked to her Lexus, got in, and moved it to the side of the road. Marcus climbed back into his truck with a grin. Follow me to your place, little brother. Let us get you filled up. As we drove through the subdivision, I felt a mixture of relief and unease. We had won this round, but I knew Patricia Whitmore was not the type to let something like this go. She had been humiliated, and people like her always found ways to get revenge. My house was a colonial-style structure with blue shutters and a 2-car garage. The oil tank was in the basement, accessible through a fill pipe on the side of the house. Marcus expertly backed his truck into the driveway and began setting up the delivery hose. How much do you really remember about that night at the casino? I asked him quietly. He glanced up at me with a knowing look. Everything. That woman lost at least $5,000 from what I could see. She was betting recklessly, getting more and more angry with every hand. When security finally removed her, she was threatening to sue everyone in sight. Do you really have video? Derek definitely took some videos that night, but I would have to check if Patricia is actually in any of them. The threat was enough, though. He paused, watching the fuel gauge on his truck. You know she's going to come after you now, right? I know, I said. But what choice did I have? Let my family freeze. Marcus finished the delivery and rolled up his hose. Just watch your back. HOA people can be vindictive. He drove off to his next delivery, and I went back inside my house. My wife Sarah and our 2 kids, Emma and Luke, were in the kitchen having breakfast. Sarah looked up at me with concern. Did you get it sorted out? She asked. For now, I said, not wanting to explain the whole situation in front of the kids. Sarah knew me well enough to read between the lines. After we got Emma and Luke on the school bus, she poured us both coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. Tell me everything, she said. I recounted the entire confrontation, including Marcus's revelation about the casino. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression growing more worried as I spoke. Oliver, "You basically blackmailed the HOA president," she said when I finished. "She was blocking essential services. What was I supposed to do?" "I am not saying you were wrong, but you had to know this is going to escalate. Patricia runs this HOA like her own personal fiefdom. She is not going to just let this slide." Sarah was right, of course. She worked as a paralegal at a law firm in Stamford, and she had a better understanding of how these things could spiral out of control. "Maybe I should try to smooth things over," I said. "Talk to her rationally when she has had time to cool down." "That might work," Sarah said doubtfully. "Or it might make things worse." I decided to give it a couple of days before approaching Patricia. In the meantime, I went about my normal routine. I worked from home as a software consultant, which gave me a flexible schedule but also meant I was around the neighborhood during the day when a lot of the HOA drama tended to unfold. 2 days after the oil delivery incident, I got a letter in the mail from the Meadowbrook Hills HOA. It was a formal notice of violation. According to the letter, my property was in breach of the following covenant regulations. My lawn was 1/4 inch too long, my mailbox had a small rust spot that was visible from the street, and my garbage bins had been left visible from the road on a non-collection day. The violations were petty and ridiculous. My lawn was perfectly maintained. I walked outside to measure it myself, and it was well within the acceptable range specified in the HOA rules. The rust spot on my mailbox was barely noticeable, the size of a pencil eraser. And the garbage bins had been left out for maybe 30 minutes after I brought them back from the curb on collection day. Each violation came with a $50 fine. $150 total for infractions that were either false or completely trivial. I called Sarah at work. "It is starting," I told her. That evening, I walked 4 houses down to where my neighbor Greg lived. Greg was on the HOA board as the treasurer, and he was one of the few reasonable people in the organization. He was outside washing his car when I arrived. "Oliver, hey," he said, looking uncomfortable. "I am guessing you got the letter. You know this is retaliation, right?" Greg put down his sponge and sighed. "Of course I know. Patricia pushed those violations through without even showing the rest of the board. She took the pictures herself." "Can the board overrule her?" "Technically, yes, but Patricia has allies. Linda and Margaret always vote with her, and that gives her a majority. Myself and Tom usually disagree with her more aggressive enforcement tactics, but we are outvoted. So what am I supposed to do?" Greg looked around as if checking that no one was listening. "You can appeal the violations to the board. We have a meeting next Thursday, but I will be honest with you, I do not think you are going to win. Patricia wants blood. This is insane. All I did was get my heating oil delivered." "I know, man. But you also apparently have some dirt on her, and that made you dangerous. Patricia does not like feeling vulnerable." I went home and told Sarah about the conversation. She immediately went into problem-solving mode, pulling up the HOA covenants and bylaws on her laptop. "There has to be something we can use," she said, scrolling through the documents. "These HOA rules have to follow state law, and there are provisions about abuse of power and harassment." We spent the next few hours going through every page of the HOA documentation. Sarah made notes, highlighting sections that might be relevant to our situation. "Here," she said finally, pointing at her screen. "Section 18 of the bylaws. It says that any board member who uses their position for personal vendettas or harassment can be removed by a 2/3 vote of the homeowners. That would require getting at least 60% of the neighborhood to vote against her," I said. "Most people are either afraid of Patricia or they do not care enough to get involved." "Then we need to make them care," Sarah said with determination. "Over the next week, Sarah and I developed a strategy. We started by talking to our immediate neighbors, explaining what had happened with the oil delivery, and showing them the ridiculous violations I had received. Most people were sympathetic, but hesitant to get involved. Patricia fined us $300 last year because our Halloween decorations were supposedly too elaborate, said Jennifer, who lived across the street. We wanted to fight it, but it just seemed easier to pay and move on. I heard similar stories from other neighbors. Patricia had a pattern of targeting people who crossed her or who she simply did not like. The fines were always for minor or fabricated violations, and most people just paid them to avoid further harassment. The HOA meeting on Thursday evening was held in the community center, a small building near the neighborhood playground. About 30 residents showed up, which was actually a good turnout. Patricia sat at the front table with the other board members, looking confident and composed. When it came time for appeals, I stood up and presented my case. I had printed photos showing that my lawn was within regulations, that the rust spot on my mailbox was smaller than the threshold specified in the rules, and that my garbage bins had been out for less than an hour. Patricia listened with a bored expression. When I finished, she shuffled some papers and said, "The board has reviewed your appeal and finds that the violations were valid. The fines stand." "You have not even discussed it with the board," I protested. "We discussed it before the meeting," Patricia said smoothly. "All in favor of upholding the violations, say aye." Linda and Margaret immediately said aye. Greg and Tom remained silent. "The ayes have it," Patricia declared. "Next order of business." "Wait," I said, still standing. "I want to address the issue of the commercial vehicle regulation that was used to block my heating oil delivery." Patricia's expression hardened. "That regulation was properly voted on and approved." "I reviewed the minutes from that meeting," Sarah said, standing up beside me. "The vote was 10 in favor, 8 against, with 15 abstentions. That means only 30% of the attending homeowners actually voted for it. Hardly a mandate." "The vote was valid according to our bylaws," Patricia countered. Tom, one of the board members who had stayed silent during my violation appeal, spoke up. "Actually, Patricia, I have been meaning to bring this up. That regulation has caused problems for several residents. We have had complaints about delayed propane deliveries, a missed septic tank pumping, and now Oliver's oil delivery. Maybe we should reconsider it." "The regulation stands," Patricia said firmly. "We cannot have heavy trucks destroying our roads." "What damage?" I asked. "Have you documented any actual damage to the roads caused by delivery trucks?" Patricia's face flushed. "That is not the point." "That is exactly the point," said a voice from the back of the room. I turned to see Marcus standing in the doorway. I had not invited him, but I was suddenly very glad he was there. "This is a homeowners' meeting," Patricia said. "You do not live here, but my brother does, and you are preventing me from doing my job, which is delivering heating fuel to people who need it." Marcus walked down the aisle between the folding chairs. "And I have been thinking a lot about our conversation the other day, Patricia, about faces and places and memories." The room had gone very quiet. Everyone was watching this exchange with fascination. Patricia stood up quickly. "This meeting is adjourned. You cannot just adjourn the meeting because you do not like where the conversation is going," Greg protested. "I just did," Patricia snapped. "Everyone out." People began filing out slowly, murmuring among themselves. Sarah grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the door. Marcus followed us outside. "That went well," Marcus said sarcastically. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I figured you might need some backup. Plus, I have been doing some research." He pulled out his phone. "Remember how I said Derek might have videos from that casino night? Well, I found them, and Patricia is definitely in several of them, causing quite a scene. Marcus, we are not really going to blackmail her, Sarah said firmly. It is not blackmail, Marcus replied. It is leverage. She is abusing her position as HOA president to harass Oliver. Sometimes you need to fight fire with fire. Or we could do this the legal way, Sarah countered. Build a case, get other homeowners on our side, and have her removed through proper channels. Marcus shrugged. Your call. But the legal way takes time, and winter is coming. How many more people are going to have problems getting fuel deliveries while you are building your case? He had a point. I looked at Sarah, and I could see her struggling with the ethical implications. Let me think about it, I said finally. Over the next few days, things escalated quickly. I received another violation notice, this time for having a decorative wreath on my front door that was allegedly not in the approved style. Another $50 fine. Then Sarah got a notice that her car had been parked too close to the curb, despite being in the exact same spot where she parked every day. Another $50. But we were not the only targets. Jennifer across the street got fined for having a garden gnome that was visible from the road. The elderly couple next door, the Hendersons, got fined because their newspaper delivery was left on their driveway for more than 2 hours one morning before they retrieved it. Patricia was on a rampage, and it seemed like she was hitting everyone who had shown any support for us at the meeting. This turned out to be a strategic mistake on Patricia's part. Instead of intimidating people into silence, she was making them angry. My phone started ringing with calls from neighbors who wanted to know what they could do. Sarah saw the opportunity. She drafted a petition calling for a special meeting to vote on Patricia's removal as HOA president. According to the bylaws, if we could get signatures from 20% of the homeowners, we could force such a meeting. We needed 34 signatures. Sarah and I went door to door, and we got them in 2 days. People were eager to sign. The Hendersons signed immediately, still furious about their newspaper fine. Jennifer signed and offered to help gather more signatures. Even some people we barely knew were happy to add their names to the petition. When we submitted the petition to the HOA board, Greg called me that same evening. You did it, he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. We have to hold the special meeting within 2 weeks. Patricia is livid. Good, I said. She should be. But I should have known Patricia would not go down without a fight. 2 days before the scheduled special meeting, I came home to find a notice taped to my front door. It was from the town of Meadowbrook, not the HOA. According to the notice, there had been a complaint about an illegal home business operating out of my residence in violation of local zoning laws. I called the town zoning office immediately. The clerk I spoke with was apologetic but firm. Someone had filed a formal complaint alleging that I was running a commercial software development business from my home, which required a special permit in our residential zone. But I am a consultant, I explained. I work from home, but I do not have clients coming to my house. I do not have employees. It is just me on my computer. That should be fine, the clerk said, but we have to investigate any formal complaint. An inspector will need to come out and verify that you are in compliance with the regulations. When? We will schedule something within the next 30 days. I knew exactly who had filed the complaint. This was Patricia's attempt to cause me as much stress and trouble as possible before the vote. Sarah was furious when I told her. This is harassment. We could probably sue her for this. That would take months or years, I said. The vote is in 2 days. Let us focus on that. The night before the special meeting, I could not sleep. I kept running scenarios through my head. We had the signatures for the petition, and I knew a lot of people were angry with Patricia. But would they actually show up to vote? And would we get the 2/3 majority needed to remove her? At 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. "Can't sleep either, huh? Come outside." I found him sitting in his truck in my driveway. I climbed into the passenger seat. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I have been thinking," Marcus said, "about Patricia and the casino thing. I did more than just find Derek's videos. I did some digging." "What kind of digging?" "Patricia Whitmore is in debt, serious debt. I have got a friend who works in finance, and he did some checking. She has maxed out credit cards, a second mortgage on her house, and she has been borrowing money from family members." "How did your friend get that information?" Marcus held up his hands. "I did not ask for details. But the point is, she has a gambling problem, a bad one, and she has been hiding it from everyone, including her husband." "How do you know her husband does not know?" "Because I followed him for a bit yesterday. He goes to work at his accounting firm, comes home, normal life. If he knew his wife was drowning in gambling debt, he would be acting differently. Trust me." I stared at my brother. "Marcus, you cannot just follow people around. That is creepy. I am trying to help you. Patricia is not going to give up her HOA presidency without a fight. She probably makes money from it somehow. You know, these HOA presidents sometimes skim funds or give contracts to companies that kick back money to them. That is a serious accusation, and one worth investigating. Greg is the treasurer, right? Have him audit the books." I sat in silence for a moment, processing everything Marcus had said. Part of me was uncomfortable with how far my brother was willing to go, but another part of me recognized that he might be right about Patricia's motivations. "Let me talk to Greg," I said finally. The next morning, I called Greg before the meeting. I did not tell him about Marcus's surveillance activities, but I did suggest that he take a close look at the HOA finances. "Why?" Greg asked suspiciously. "Just a hunch. Has anyone ever actually audited the accounts?" There was a long pause. "Not since I have been treasurer. Patricia has always handled most of the financial stuff, and I just review what she gives me. Maybe you should dig deeper." "Oliver, what do you know?" "Nothing concrete, but Patricia's behavior has been erratic lately. Just check the accounts carefully. Look for anything unusual." Greg agreed, though he sounded uncertain. I spent the rest of the day preparing for the meeting, reviewing my notes about Patricia's abuses of power and making sure I had documentation for everything. The special meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. at the community center. Sarah and I arrived at 6:30 to find a line of people already waiting to get in. The building could hold maybe 50 people comfortably, and it looked like we were going to exceed that number significantly. Patricia arrived at 6:45, flanked by her supporters Linda and Margaret. She looked composed and professional in a navy blue suit, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. The meeting started promptly at 7. Greg, as treasurer, called the meeting to order and explained the process. There would be statements from both sides, then a vote by secret ballot. A 2/3 majority was required to remove Patricia from her position. Patricia spoke first. She gave a polished speech about her dedication to the neighborhood, the improvements she had overseen during her tenure, and her commitment to maintaining property values. She made no mention of the oil delivery incident or the various fines she had been levying. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and faced the crowd. I had prepared notes, but I decided to speak from the heart instead. "I moved to this neighborhood 5 years ago because it seemed like a great place to raise my kids," I began. "Good schools, nice houses, friendly neighbors. And for the most part, it has been. But over the past few years, the HOA has become less about serving the community and more about control and intimidation." I detailed the incident with the oil delivery, showing how Patricia had blocked essential services based on a regulation that most homeowners had not even known about. I talked about the frivolous fines, not just the ones I had received, but the ones inflicted on other neighbors. I held up the violation notice about my decorative wreath. "This is not about maintaining standards," I said. "This is about one person using her authority to punish anyone who disagrees with her. We deserve better leadership than this." When I sat down, several other homeowners stood up to share their own experiences with Patricia's enforcement tactics. The Hendersons talked about their newspaper fine. Jennifer described being cited for her garden gnome. A man I barely knew named Robert explained how Patricia had fined him $200 because his teenage son's car was allegedly leaking oil, even though a mechanic had certified that the car was fine. The stories kept coming, and I could see Patricia's confidence crumbling. Her face was red, and she kept whispering urgently to Linda and Margaret. After the statements concluded, Greg distributed paper ballots. Each homeowner wrote either remove or retain and dropped their ballot into a box. Greg, Tom, and another board member counted the votes while everyone waited in tense silence. Finally, Greg stood up and cleared his throat. "The votes have been counted and verified. Out of 63 ballots cast, 47 voted to remove, 16 voted to retain. That is 74.6% in favor of removal, which exceeds the 2/3 requirement." The room erupted in applause. Patricia sat frozen in her chair, staring straight ahead. Linda and Margaret looked shocked. I felt Sarah squeeze my hand, and I realized I had been holding my breath. "Patricia Whitmore is hereby removed as president of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA," Greg continued. "We will hold elections for a new president at the next regular meeting." Patricia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is not over," she said, her voice shaking. "I will challenge this vote. The bylaws allow for appeals." "You can try," Tom said quietly, "but I think this decision reflects the will of the community pretty clearly." Patricia grabbed her things and stormed out of the community center. Linda and Margaret hurried after her. The rest of us stayed for another hour, celebrating and discussing what changes we wanted to see in the HOA going forward. I should have felt relieved. We had won. Patricia was out, but something did not feel right. She had given up too easily. I knew her well enough by now to recognize that she was planning something. My instincts proved correct 3 days later. I was working at my computer when I got a call from Greg. "Oliver, we have a problem," he said. "A big problem." "What is it?" "I took your advice and went through the HOA financial records carefully. There is money missing. A lot of money." My stomach dropped. "How much?" "Over the past 3 years, approximately $47,000 has been diverted from the HOA accounts." Patricia had been writing checks to a company called Meadowbrook Property Management for various services. I called the company. They do not exist. The checks were deposited into an account that I traced back to Patricia. Oh my God, it gets worse. She also approved inflated bids from contractors for various maintenance work, and I think she was getting kickbacks from them. I have found at least 3 instances where we paid double what the work should have cost. What are you going to do? I have already called the police. This is embezzlement, fraud, probably other crimes too. They are going to want to talk to you since you were the one who started questioning her leadership. 2 hours later, a Detective Morrison from the Meadowbrook Police Department arrived at my house. He was a solid-looking man in his 50s with gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. I told him everything, from the blocked oil delivery to the retaliatory fines to the special meeting that removed Patricia from power. "And this audit that uncovered the embezzlement, that was your idea?" Detective Morrison asked. I suggested that the treasurer look more closely at the finances, yes, but I had no idea he would find actual crimes. I just thought something did not add up about Patricia's behavior. What made you suspicious? I hesitated, not wanting to bring up Marcus's investigation into Patricia's gambling debts. She was acting increasingly erratic and vindictive. It seemed like she was desperate to hold onto power, which made me wonder if there was a financial motive. Detective Morrison made notes and told me he would be in touch if he had more questions. Over the next week, the investigation moved quickly. Police obtained warrants for Patricia's bank records and found exactly what Greg had suspected. She had been systematically stealing from the HOA for years, using the money to pay off her gambling debts and maintain her lifestyle. The story broke in the local newspaper, the Meadowbrook Gazette. HOA president arrested for embezzlement, read the headline. The article detailed how Patricia had stolen nearly $50,000 from the Homeowners Association and faced multiple felony charges. I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. Yes, Patricia had been terrible and corrupt, but it was still surreal to see someone from my neighborhood being led away in handcuffs, which was shown in a photo accompanying the news story. The fallout continued for weeks. Patricia's husband filed for divorce. Linda and Margaret, who had supported her throughout everything, resigned from the HOA board in embarrassment. The HOA hired a forensic accountant to go through all the records and determine the full extent of the theft. Meanwhile, the neighborhood began the process of healing and rebuilding. At the next regular HOA meeting, we held elections for a new president. Greg was elected by a wide margin, with Tom as vice president. One of their first acts was to repeal the ridiculous commercial vehicle regulation that had started this whole mess. Marcus was able to make his oil deliveries without any further interference. In fact, Greg made a point of thanking him publicly at a meeting for his service to the community. The zoning complaint against me was dropped after an inspector came out and confirmed I was not running an illegal business. All the frivolous fines that Patricia had levied were voided, and the HOA actually issued refunds to everyone who had paid them. Things slowly returned to normal. The neighborhood felt different, though. People were more engaged, more willing to speak up about issues. We had learned that letting one person accumulate too much unchecked power was dangerous. About 3 months after Patricia's arrest, I ran into her husband David at the grocery store. He looked exhausted with deep circles under his eyes. "Oliver," he said when he saw me, "I owe you an apology." "You do not owe me anything, David. You are not responsible for what Patricia did." "I should have known," he said quietly. "The signs were there. The credit card bills, the way she was always stressed about money but refused to talk about it. I just did not want to see it." "None of us saw the extent of it," I said. "She was good at hiding it." The prosecutor offered her a plea deal. 5 years in prison, restitution of the full amount she stole plus interest. Her lawyer is advising her to take it. "I am sorry you are going through this." David shook his head. "Do not be. I am actually relieved in a weird way. Living with her these past few years was like walking on eggshells. Everything was always a crisis, always drama. Now at least I know why." We parted ways, and I finished my shopping. When I got home, Sarah was in the kitchen making dinner while Emma and Luke did homework at the table. "You will never guess who I ran into," I said, and told her about the conversation with David. "That is sad," Sarah said, "but I guess at least there is some closure." The legal process moved forward over the following months. Patricia pleaded guilty to embezzlement and fraud in May. She was sentenced to 5 years in state prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. Her assets, including her house, were seized to help cover the debt. The forensic accountant's final report revealed that Patricia had actually stolen closer to $60,000 when all the kickbacks and fraudulent contracts were accounted for. The HOA used the information to pursue civil suits against some of the contractors who had been involved in the scheme. By the time summer arrived, Meadowbrook Hills had transformed under Greg's leadership. The HOA became more transparent, with monthly financial reports posted online for all homeowners to review. Enforcement of rules was consistent and reasonable, focused on genuine issues rather than petty violations. The commercial vehicle regulation was not just repealed, but replaced with a common-sense policy that allowed necessary service vehicles while still restricting genuinely disruptive traffic. Marcus and other delivery drivers had no more problems accessing the neighborhood. One evening in late July, I was sitting on my back deck with Sarah, watching Emma and Luke play in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "You know what is strange?" I said. "If Patricia had just let Marcus make that oil delivery, none of this would have happened. She would still be HOA president, still stealing money, and no one would have questioned her." "Her ego and vindictiveness were her downfall," Sarah agreed. "She could not stand being challenged, even over something as simple as a heating oil delivery." "Marcus really was the key to everything," I said. "If he had not remembered seeing her at that casino, we would not have had any leverage. And if I had not asked Greg to audit the books, the embezzlement might have gone on for years." "Your brother is an interesting guy," Sarah said. "That memory of his is genuinely impressive." I called Marcus the next day and invited him over for a barbecue the following weekend. He showed up with his girlfriend Rachel, a teacher he had been dating for about 6 months. We grilled burgers and hot dogs while the kids played and the adults talked. "So you are the famous Marcus," Sarah said, handing him a beer. "The man who brought down the evil HOA president." Marcus laughed. "I just delivered oil and remembered a face. Oliver did all the hard work organizing the neighborhood. You sold yourself short," I said. "If you had not called Patricia out that first morning, she would have sent you away and probably would have made my life miserable for months, until I could get another delivery scheduled." "True," Marcus admitted, "but you were the one who had the courage to stand up to her. A lot of people would have just paid the fines and kept their heads down." "I had a family to keep warm," I said simply. "That made it non-negotiable." Rachel, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "It is interesting how small moments of courage can cascade into bigger changes. You stood up for yourself, which gave other people courage to speak up, which led to uncovering actual crimes." She was right. The entire situation had snowballed from one blocked driveway and one refused oil delivery. It reminded me that we never know how our actions will ripple outward. Later that night, after Marcus and Rachel had left and the kids were in bed, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. It had been 8 months since that cold October morning when I had gotten Marcus's text message. 8 months of stress, confrontation, investigation, and resolution. The neighborhood was better for it. The HOA was functioning properly now, serving homeowners instead of bullying them. Patricia was facing the consequences of her actions. And I had learned that sometimes standing up for what is right, even when it is uncomfortable, is worth it. I also thought about the role that chance had played in everything. If Marcus had not been the one driving the oil truck that day, would things have turned out differently? If he had not happened to see Patricia at that casino months earlier, would we have found another way to push back against her? If I had not suggested that Greg audit the books, would the embezzlement have continued undetected? There were so many variables, so many small moments that could have gone differently. But they had not. The sequence of events had unfolded exactly as they did, leading to justice being served. The following spring, the HOA held its annual meeting. Greg gave a comprehensive report on the state of the association, including the financial recovery from Patricia's theft. Thanks to the restitution payments and the recovered funds from the civil suits, the HOA was actually in decent financial shape. "We have turned a bad situation into an opportunity to rebuild stronger," Greg said to the assembled homeowners. "We have new bylaws that require multiple board members to approve any expenditure over $500. We have quarterly audits by an independent accountant. And we have a more engaged membership that is paying attention to what the board does." There was applause, and I felt a sense of pride. This was a community effort, not just my victory. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to thank me personally for standing up to Patricia. It was gratifying but also a bit embarrassing. I had just been trying to heat my house. "You did more than that," Jennifer said. "You showed all of us that we did not have to accept being bullied. That matters." As spring turned to summer and then fall came around again, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The anniversary of the blocked oil delivery passed without incident. In fact, when Marcus made his delivery that October, Greg happened to be outside and waved to him. "No roadblocks this year," Marcus joked as he set up his hose. "Not on my watch," Greg replied. I stood in my driveway, watching the interaction and feeling grateful for how things had turned out. The nightmare of Patricia's reign was over. The neighborhood was thriving under competent, honest leadership. My family was safe and warm. That evening I got a call from Detective Morrison, whom I had not heard from in months. "I wanted to let you know that Patricia Whitmore was transferred to the State Correctional Facility in York," he said. "She is officially beginning her sentence." "Thank you for letting me know," I said. "I also wanted to tell you something off the record," the detective continued. "In my 28 years doing this job, I have seen a lot of HOA disputes. Most of them are petty and do not amount to anything criminal. But every once in a while, you get a case like this where someone has been abusing their authority for a long time, and it takes one person willing to push back to uncover the truth. You did a good thing." After we hung up, I sat quietly for a moment. Then I went to find Sarah and the kids. They were in the living room watching a movie together. I squeezed onto the couch with them, and Emma immediately snuggled against me. This was what mattered. Not the drama with the HOA or the satisfaction of seeing Patricia face justice. This warm, safe home filled with the people I loved. Everything I had done had been to protect this. The story could have ended there with a neat bow and everyone living happily ever after. But life is messier than that. About a year after Patricia's sentencing, I received a letter in the mail. It was from her, sent from the correctional facility. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was surprisingly thoughtful. Patricia apologized for her behavior, acknowledging that she had let her gambling addiction spiral out of control and had hurt many people in the process. She explained that she was getting treatment in prison and was working on understanding the root causes of her problems. "I do not expect your forgiveness," she wrote, "but I wanted you to know that I recognize what I did was wrong. I abused my position, I stole from people who trusted me, and I made your life difficult out of nothing more than spite and ego. You were right to stand up to me, and the neighborhood is better off without me in charge." I showed the letter to Sarah. She read it carefully and then looked at me. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I do not know. Part of me wants to write,